and welcome to another 5 to 10 minute summary where we take a blog and we give you a little snapshot. So for those of you who can't read the blogs or don't have time for that, this video gives you a little overview. So today's video is about my latest blog on making exercise a habit, breaking down some habit science, psychology of motivation, and really looking at how we can change behavior. So at the very start of the blog here, we kind of talk about how we want to make exercise a habit and we want to make it happen often. It's the consistency that's the most important variable in exercise. Doing it often, even if it's not always fully done well, is the most important thing in getting results and getting exercise as medicine. What's interesting about habit and kind of motivational research is that they've continually kind of been able to discover that although we all know we need to eat better and sleep more and move more and spend less, research is kind of showing that despite knowing all of this, people are continually making decisions that undermine their overall well-being. So we're really good at looking at the long term and having positive outlook, but we're not very good at making small decisions that can actually amount to better outcomes. So this is an example of this is that, we give someone an educational pamphlet on exercise as medicine, or we give them a rehab plan, or your oncologist says, yes, exercise is good for you. But I think it's important we start acknowledging that habits are actually really hard, even for a healthy person. And what we're learning is that the more barriers to the habit, the harder it is. And so when you throw in a cancer diagnosis, you have a lot of barriers. The stress of the diagnosis, the many appointments, the kind of ad hoc nature of it all, and not knowing what the future holds, lots of barriers. So it makes habit formation even harder. We know that some of these barriers in a cancer diagnosis, we've called symptom burden. That can be fatigue, dizziness, weakness, pain, or lack of motivation. As I've noted here, sometimes there's even confusion around what is exercise, is it safe, what should I be doing for how long, how intense, and that confusion can be even an additional barrier. In my previous blog on how to exercise with cancer, I answered some of the top questions. So if you have any questions in regards to exercising with cancer safely and effectively, please see my previous blog or video. As far as habit formation goes, back on track here, Dr. Daniel Kahneman is a really prolific behavioral economist who has made great grounds in the research of behavioral economics, which is kind of like the research of decision making. How that is relevant to those with cancer is that we've really come to understand that behavior is not just a rational response. So if I just tell you to exercise, or if I just give you an educational pamphlet, it really is actually more complicated than that. What he's defined behavior as is this kind of equilibrium. And you see in my blog here, this kind of scale. And this scale has two components. It has restraining forces and driving forces. And that's kind of how we have to think about behavior and habits. So it's really important to think about these two concepts because lots of the time people think, I just got to work in the driving forces. If you just muster up a little bit more motivation, if you kick yourself into high gear, if you just stop beating yourself up and have a little bit more, motivation, you will do it. Things will get done. And if people just kind of shout at each other a little bit louder and a little bit harder, motivation will come. And so we used to really think of behavioral change like that. If you just kind of kick it into high gear, people will respond. But what we've really learned is actually the opposite. So behaviors often get done when we lessen the restraining forces. So in other words, the more you look at all the barriers, you acknowledge them, and you try to make the behavior easy, you are increasing the odds of that behavior getting done, which is really important when it comes to habit. So some simple questions you could ask yourself if you're really struggling in this realm of exercise and habits and forming consecutive and consistent exercise habits. You can ask yourself, why hasn't the exercise been adopted? Why am I not doing it every day? Write out those reasons. How can I change my environment to better support this habit? How can I make it even easy to adopt this new habit and this new behavior? Maybe I need to change my expectations or the type of exercise or the environment or the equipment that's used. Maybe it needs to be social. How can I add more meaning to this behavior or to this exercise? So sometimes when we zoom bigger than ourselves and we really understand the intrinsic value of something or its role in society, we are more motivated to be able to take part in that behavior or that habit. So maybe really understanding the science of how exercise is medicine and how you can do it safely, as I've noted in my previous blog, will give you that extra bit of motivation to intrinsically understand why you should adopt an exercise habit. So once again, just to kind of pitch, here at the Cancer Physio, we do offer personalized cancer rehab, and this is driven by care for people and science. We offer cancer rehab supports and tools that work through all 5 stages of rehab. And it's really important to understand that personalized rehab in this context isn't just diagnosis and stage, but it's also understanding your barriers and how we can break that down to help you form habits. So through that coaching process, we can help you find the right rehab plan and the right kind of exercise habit that's right for you. Another great, intellect in the area of habit formation is Charles Duhigg, and he wrote a book called The Power of Habit. I highly recommend it. He speaks to habits as habit loops. So a habit is not just a behavior or an action. It's actually a cue, a behavior, and a reward. And so it's really interesting to think of habits this way, because it actually opens up a whole other opportunity to break down the itty-gritty, to get better, and to try to make habits happen. So on my blog, I list a bunch of different ways that you can break down habit loops and kind of hack them so that you're more likely to form an exercise habit. So we just finished summarizing kind of ways to make behaviors easy, because that's really key in them getting done. But now we're talking a bit about habit loop formation. So we know, first of all, cues matter. So set up your environment or your schedule to trigger an action that can become a habit. We are visual beings. We know routines work. Lay out your clothes, lay out the runners in a way that's easy and visual, and that you have cues in your environment. Tell your family members about the upcoming appointments so they ask you about it, and you have cues coming in different directions, reminding you of the habit that's about to take place. We also know rewards matter. So I always say, always finish exercise with a reward. Our brain remembers the last part of an experience. So it's super important to finish with a nice stretch, a hot shower, or a tasty snack. We also know that beliefs matter, and I touched on this a little bit. You have to understand the habit and intrinsically see value in it. So understand exercise science and how to exercise safely. Feel confident in that, and that will help. We also know small habits matter. Every person who's accomplished anything great will most often tell you it was all these marginal gains that amounted to something. All this small change and small habit loop formation can snowball into big changes over time, can amount to exercise as medicine. So it's important for small habits to understand your phase of treatment, to be realistic with yourself, set small goals, and start there and understand where your body is each day. The last cue that I kind of talked about in the habit loop list here is that willpower actually can be learned, and there's a lot of neat psychology out there now on grit and the power of passion and performance. Once again, referencing Duckworth here, and how if you have kind of the drive and the work ethic and the willingness, that actually goes a lot farther than anything. So we know that willpower can be learned. So be strategic. Learn your energy cycles and try to optimize your day, for the most important things. Once again, understanding which phase of treatment you're in and what the realistic goals can be for that phase is a good way to form habits that are specific to that phase. So with all this reflection on kind of habit loops and how to hack them and how to hopefully reflect and remove barriers to make a behavior more easy, I hope that in combination with all of those thoughts and all the content on my blog, that you have some insight and some optimism about how to make exercise a habit. After all, it's all those small little actions each day that can amount to exercise as medicine over the long run. And once again, thank you for your interest in science and rehab.